Hey everyone, this is Jeff Alberts,
Brian Miner,
Alberto Nunez,
Brad Loomis, and Eric Helms.
and this is the 3D Muscle Journey podcast, where we bring you world-class coaching and evidence-based education for the natural bodybuilding community.
It was 2008, 2009, and we thought that If It Fits Your Macros was here to solve the world's problems. No more obesity. Everyone was going to be jacked, shredded if they wanted, flexible. And in hindsight, boy, did it cause a bunch of issues. Who remembers that dark but necessary time that we had to go through as a community?
I mean, I think for me, it was at the time pretty liberating in the sense that I was coming off like meal plans.
You took off your bra, basically. Yeah.
Let's let my hair down a little bit. Yeah, it was like the first prep I did, and that was all very meal plan, pretty bland meal plan based. And like I remember thinking like, I'm gonna get to have some low fat popcorn, and it was this exotic menu that I now have access to. But like you said, it sort of, people, at one point it became like this badge of honor to like, let's see how much shit we can fit into our diet and still stay under our caloric budget, with kind of ignoring the fact that body composition isn't the end all be all when it comes to overall health and actually in behaviors. But I remember, and I remember the next prep when I actually worked with you, Bert, the plan that I got, I wish I still had the old email, because at the top it was like in bold letters, it was like, come within these macro numbers within plus or minus 5. And I remember like going over like 3 grams from like fish oil and being like, oh shit. So I just stopped taking the fish oil. So that was the solution at the time. But yeah, it was, I think it created some disordered eating habits for a lot of people. I mean, I feel like I kind of broke out of it early enough before it became too detrimental, but that's not the case for everybody, and it's easy to understand why, because it was sort of sold as this oasis for staying lean, and everybody can do this. It's like, oh, you're obese, never tracked calories before, let's get you tracking calories down to the gram. It's and that's like the default approach, and obviously things have evolved considerably since then. But I'd be curious to hear Jeff's perspective, because I know he's been doing this a lot longer. And probably, I wonder if he was playing macro Tetris at any point.
I mean, you said you prepped once with like a meal plans, right?
Yeah. And
multiply that by
hundreds of dollars of Scivation products.
I mean, I did that like 10 times, 11 times.
Yeah.
Prior to meeting this guy over here. Basically, I remember when Berto introduced me to flexible dieting, I was kind of just looking at the stuff he was eating, going like, how in the F are you getting so shredded eating that shit? Like, and at the time, like, I mean, he probably hates it now, like the Pop-Tart thing. Like, you're kind of known for Pop-Tarts. Eventually, I became known for like protein cakes, and that irritated the shit out of me. But I just like think in my mind, like, how I'm going to go from, it was difficult for me because I had a lot of success before meeting you, Berto. Like, I just came off getting my pro cards, plenty of shows under my belt, lots of first place, wins I've had and all that. And I'm like, I've been pretty locked down on my diet. I've been highly successful. Now all of a sudden you want me to go from eating like nothing but, quote unquote, all these healthy type foods. Now you're telling me I can fit stuff in? Like, and then it was uncomfortable to go from the system I had, which was measuring cups, things like how I was like going about tracking things. Now all of a sudden I'm like, Now you want me to just put things on food scales. Like, it was just a completely different system and way of doing things. And I don't like change. I don't think a lot of people like change. So it was like a 180 of how I was going about my system and how I did things. So it was just kind of a shock to the system. But I remember like I tried it for about a day or two and I'm like, no, I'm going back. I'm going back to my brown rice, my chicken and all that. I'm like, no, let me just keep at it. I'll get better at it. And eventually I started to get better at it. But then, like you said, Brian, it was almost like I started to go way on this other side of the extreme of like, what can I get away with? Like, this is like, okay, I'm making progress with eating this stuff, like, but what can I actually get away with? So now all of a sudden, like, instead of having like my menu looking like quote unquote 90% like really wholesome type foods, now all of a sudden it's like 50-50. And sometimes like refeeds, it's like, okay, now it's like I could really get away with some shit. So I started to get a little more extreme as far as like being way too flexible. So it took a while, it took probably a good 2 preps after that to kind of get myself more in the middle again, more balanced. So that's kind of my experience with that.
Quick rest in peace to fat-free Pringles. I think they were like our spirit animal when it came to if it fits your macros. A whole can, no fat, 81 grams of carbs, trace protein, and they were delicious. And if you lived in certain regions of the country, you could even get the barbecue ones. So they had the plain.
Tell everybody the downside of that.
Oh yes, so everything in life has its small print, and olestra, I think the chemical, the actual trademark name is olein. Yeah, so it has these very interesting side effects when it comes to gastric emptying. It really just Niagara Falls you, pretty much. And it kind of depends on the person. I don't think I ever experienced a whole lot of that. I could put down 2 cans.
Because you got me onto those. So I'm like, here, try these, Jeff. So I'm like, oh, I can eat a whole can? I'm like, cool. So then I got creative. I'm like, okay, let me take my whey sludge. It's like chocolate protein powder. I'd get some peanut butter, mix that, make a sludge out of it. And then I would dip the Pringles in that. So it's like a sweet and salty.
It was very, very complete dish.
And I will say, thankfully, I didn't get the whey sludge shits. Like I was okay. But yeah, that was some good days right there.
That was, and it's a heavily researched product actually, and I they just took it off the shelves randomly because I don't think a whole lot of people who were quite acclimated to it were even really it was probably the noobs that just didn't know, but at some point that needs to come back, I feel. So I will say that. Yeah, before I tell my story, I remember you transitioning to that, Jeff, and because I was there for it, and it was like you had a more default sort of system, maybe a little more strict in hindsight than it needed to be, but then you try this for a few days, and then you're like, this is just all the small print that comes with if it fits your macros. Like, you're thinking about it too much, it's like, how did I got 15 grams of protein for dinner? What happened, right? It just takes up a lot of your bandwidth, and it makes you more food focused than I think you probably should be, I think, just across the board, but especially when you are contest prepping. So I remember you quitting it, coming back, and then eventually you found that situation where it was tolerable, I guess. And
it was like learning how to ride a bike. Like I fell off a few times before I'm like, oh, I'm actually pedaling.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So for me, I think dietary things came last. Like I was always really about my training. And in hindsight, I think I started off pretty well because it was just little interventions. Like I usually would eat a big breakfast before going to school. The way my mother did it was kind of crazy in hindsight. She would just give us like dozen donuts from Safeway. They were so cheap, a gallon of milk. And she's like, you three figure it out, and that's what we would do. We'd figure it out. It was like 3-4 donuts, depending on how fast you could eat a piece. And I would not eat lunch at school because it was gross. But eventually I'm like, you know what? If I want to train well after school, I need to have a little something. So I would roll up Wonder Bread in foil, keep it in my backpack, and on the bus right over there, have that. And then I discovered that, hey, you should probably eat some protein. So I started to save up my coins so I could have a Mesotech bar post-workout. And then eventually it's like, oh no, there's a protein quota for the day, and I kept adding things in segments. So I think that was pretty appropriate. I didn't overload myself. And then eventually I think if it fits your macros, the systems I were using were something more along the lines of actually the default diet that we recommend, where typically we have a course on that, the default diet. And honestly, I think great place to test the waters. It is just as pliable as if it fits your macros, and the essence of these sort of systems just much more timeless for sure. But I remember it'd be things like my breakfast, for example, would be a complex carb, a simple carb, 2 eggs, and a chicken breast in the morning. And then if, say, my body weight wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, I could either add or subtract from that. Then, I prepped, and what was a really good system, all of a sudden I remember I did a modified diet similar to what Brian did, the cut diet at the time. And that didn't go very well. And it was crazy because in hindsight, I just completely put everything I had learned over time to the side and started this thing. And in hindsight, it was all there. It's like, why am I having green beans before training? Like, this makes no sense, but that's what was on the menu. I switched over to If It Fits Your Macros with when I got coaching from Lane Norton. And I remember just asking him a few times, just a few questions like, can I have this? Can I have that? And he kept saying yes. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to stop asking. And I'm just going to, make things fit. And yeah, it was crazy because I was eating all these things that I would usually not have, like low-fat ice cream. But it got to the point where just the eating became very weird and restrictive in its own way. It served its purpose. I got lean. I did well, but beyond what it should have done. And what it did do for me at the start was, like, for example, one thing that was very clear to me, I thought I was eating 200 grams of protein because I was never weighing my food. I would just kind of eyeball portions. And I remember when, mind you, I was overbulked. I was like 190 something pounds, and Lane tells me it's 240 grams of protein. I remember my numbers to this day: 50 grams of fat, 175 carb, and 240 protein. I was like, man, that's a lot of protein, but sure. And then I remember two things, like, as I started rolling with the system. First one was, oh shoot, like, my breakfast was pretty loaded with fat. I had no idea, but my protein was a big one because I thought he was clearly giving me way too much. And I'm like, 240 is nothing. How much was I eating at some point? I have no clue. So what it did for me was kind of gave me this objective insight on my behaviors, right? Because underweight people tend to overreport their intake, and overweight people the inverse of that. So it really let me figure those things out. And in hindsight, I think that's where it serves its purpose. Calorie counting can do this as well, but this was like a layer deeper. So what would have been good for me, maybe, is to maybe count macros for an extended period of time. And, eventually you kind of start putting foods in categories like, oh, this is going to be carbs and protein. And, oh, guess what? Oatmeal doesn't just have, if you eat enough of it, just just carbs, right? It's got protein attached, it's got fat attached. And again, it's subjective insight when it comes to your decision making. But I ran that thing for like way too long because it was the contest prep plus the reverse diet, the classic reverse diet, like afterwards, where I was increasing calories like by 100 calories, 25 grams of carbs primarily. So I got an extra apple every week, like post contest prep, basically. And yes, it got to the point where it went from liberating to all of a sudden extremely restrictive. And I think where people would really see this was whenever they would try to eat out socially, right? Social eating. Because in the past, when I was using more of my default system, just kind of moving foods in and out, it's like, okay, well, I'm always taking care of business. And if, friends want to go get some tacos, I guess this meal is just tacos. And then I get right back to what I was usually doing. And, yeah. And then I'd take a little bit away from maybe the next meal and just move on with my life. Whereas if it fits your macros, it's like, oh, shoot, like I saved up, I don't know, like 20 it was always like per nutrition labels, like fat, carbs, and protein. I saved up 20, 125, and 40, and there's nothing in this menu that they can help me roll with that. So I create a lot of anxiety when it comes to that. And it created these very neurotic bodybuilders, I think, that were focused on things that they didn't really have as big of an impact on the big pictures as we thought. But yeah, that was my experience. And, of course I went on to continue teaching other people how to do this as well. And that was kind of the gold standard, I think, for a good 4 or 5 years, where if it fits your macros was the thing. And so much so that some people named their companies after this sort of eating systems. And yeah, and here we are today. So, yeah, sorry to all my athletes who I had on 3 numbers for much longer than I honestly needed to. But, again, it was a renaissance period of sorts for the fitness industry.
This is me, like, that was on meal plans at the time, like meeting you guys, like getting to know all you guys. Like, I remember going to Eric's house and there was like a house full of bodybuilders. And it was my first time in Eric's house. And, I'm like, hey, what's up, guys? Whatever. But everybody was talking about their macros. What's your macros, bro? Like that's what people are asking me. I'm like, I don't even know what macros are. I don't think right now. They're asking me this stuff, but every social setting within the bodybuilding community that I was involved with around, like this was before 3D Muscle Journey became 3D Muscle Journey. That was the topic of conversation. Like that's how like you walk into a room, it's like no one would say, hey man, how you doing? How's the family? It's like, hey, what's up? What's your macros? And they just start talking about their macros. And me coming from meal plans, which was kind of like, wow, this guy's over the top rigid, he's hardcore. I kind of saw that as a different type of hardcore. I'm like, they're really like the behaviors around it was kind of similar. Like it's obsessive and thinking about that. I remember like, man, these guys are just so into the macros. Like, and then it was like you said, Berto, like you're sitting there at a meal in your brain. And a lot of times people would say it out loud, like, oh, I only have like 8 fat left and I have this many carbs and this much. How do I fit this shit in? And then they're on their phone trying to figure shit out. But yet there's people around there, like, you look at across tables, they're like talking about like, hey man, how's the weather? Like, what's the Lakers doing? And it's like, but here's this group of people just like, it's like a whole different world. And to me, I kind of saw that as like a different type of extreme. It's like, so it's, to me, it's like, I've kind of been in both realms. So now it's like, I think more in terms of like, what are my behaviors like around food? And what is the system that's going to cater towards like good, normal type behaviors, healthy behaviors is probably a good way to describe it. just want to throw that out there. Because you were mentioning about the social stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's like a huge part of this, I think. We can't forget.
It's interesting because the irony of that level of detail is that most people still sucked at estimating calories. It's like I can estimate the macros and then I'll do the math and get the calories. But it's like most people couldn't just look at a meal and be like, all right, 900 calories, or roughly. And that's a skill set that I think I developed after I was, logging macros militantly. And I think that's probably a more valuable skill set to have in those situations because, like, okay, I've got roughly 600 to 800 calories to work with here. And if I go over a little bit, whatever. And it's just easier rather than finding something on, looking up nutrition facts online before you go to a restaurant, which are never accurate anyway. And in fact, like fast food's probably the most accurate out of all of them because it's so standardized. But yeah, going to like a regular restaurant is it would cause a lot of anxiety for people, myself included early on. And kind of the way I look at it now is, somebody who's health conscious, who's not dieting for bodybuilding, it's like they have a good pulse on their intake and kind of they have better awareness of their hunger and satiety cues, even though they're not involved in the sport, than a lot of bodybuilders had during that time, and still a lot, struggle with that. So I think it's a worthwhile thing to learn. Tracking I think is definitely useful. It's probably the most predictable way to make progress, like tracking calories and protein anyway. But it's definitely not, like, results aren't dependent on tracking. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get it backwards. They get this sense of guilt because you would also see the situation where people would go over, like, oh, I went over my fats by 15 grams. And then they're like, fuck it. I'll just get back on track on Monday, and then it just snowballs into something that it didn't need to be. So yeah, I think having more of like just a caloric budget, I think is easier for people to manage. And I always try to kind of draw, make the comparison to like personal finance in a sense. It's like we shouldn't need to check our bank account every time we pull out our debit card, or credit card or something like that. We should know what's a responsible and irresponsible expense, and like that just comes with kind of experience. And people just lost sight of that during that time, I think. Hey 3DMJers, this is Coach Brian Miner here to remind you that investing in expert guidance is one of the time-tested hallmarks of serious athletes across all sports. And for competitive athletes striving for peak performance, working with an experienced coach isn't just a luxury, it can be essential. At 3D Muscle Journey, we understand the dedication it takes to reach your physique and strength goals, and we provide the programming and support not only to get you there effectively, but sustainably. But our craft isn't just for the stage or the platform. We create career-spanning relationships with our clients to guide you along your lifting journey in a stepwise manner. We don't do quick fixes or rush transformations because those will always only be temporary. We know the art and skill of becoming an advanced lifter takes years, and we want to work with athletes who are willing to put in the time and effort. If you want to learn more about all of our coaching options, systems, and prices, please go to our website, 3dmusclejourney.com. We offer weekly coaching for in-season competitors and bi-weekly coaching for off-season and recreational lifters. There are also 3 time-frame options for one-off video consults that each include a training program and nutrition program every 8 to 16 weeks. Our mission is to create athletic careers for serious lifters, and our one-on-one coaching program is how we do that best. It's more than just workouts and meal plans. We deliver comprehensive support tailored to your individual needs. Don't let another training cycle pass without the expert guidance you deserve. Invest in your athletic future now and sign yourself up for coaching today at 3dmusclejourney.com. Thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of the show.
I think we need to go over why it was such a big deal, big movement, and that's what it was trying to fix. which was the dark times of just menu-based diets, which were more restrictive in their own way. They had some things going on for them, but usually two things. It was one, a lot of coaches were just sending out these generic meal plans. Like, this is for the women, this is for the men, and whoever kind of survived it, well, that's my guy, right? Or gal. So there was that, and it guess it proved a lot of things right, that there isn't just, I forgot the exact quote, which I still talked to Dave online, 5 or 10 foods at work, right? Like we can broaden up the menus beyond that. So that's kind of what was normal. I think a lot of, now that we've been through these phases, like if you speak to some coaches that maybe haven't been around as long, they'll tell you that, yeah, calories matter. Like, absolutely, like that's not what I'm saying. But here's the thing. It's like there was a long stretch of time where your ancestors from your lineage didn't believe that to be true, right? That it's not just calories in versus calories out, which to a large extent it actually is. So that's what it was trying to fix, because I mean, could you imagine like trying to get into bodybuilding and that's just part of your starter kit day one? It's like, this is your to-do list. There's really not a whole lot of interaction between you and the system. There isn't a whole lot of education taking place. You're just kind of following the rules, and you either do or you don't. And if you don't, well, you're just going to feel like, man, this isn't for me. So, to some extent, if it fits your macros, was kind of some people's saving grace. It got them rolling. But again, we just spend way, way too much time there. And I think now, we're kind of in the middle, which is where most answers when it comes to bodybuilding actually are, right? They're very context dependent, and we got to be able to sidestep this way or that way. And you can't do that if you're in either extreme, whether it's a rigid menu or hit it within 5 grams sort of, if it's your macro sort of plan. So what do you guys do with your athlete? Like let's just say, take yourself, for example, right? Like, you're out the box new, right? When you first started doing this, how do you start the process of educating them when it comes to nutrition in regards to how it mostly relates to bodybuilding and yeah, health as well?
I think the first thing that I like to do is just get an idea of where their education is on the matter. If they've been, the truth is, if they're applying with us, they probably have some exposure to tracking in most cases, not always. But if they don't, it's good to kind of get an idea, like, okay, what's a typical day of eating look like for you? And from there, it's like you can find a few things to focus on, usually almost immediately, like protein intake. Okay, I'm 200-pound guy and I'm eating 100 grams of protein. It's like, okay, we could probably benefit from increasing that. Or, they're only eating red meats, and like their fat intake's really high, their training intensity, maybe sometimes they, get lethargic through their training session. Like, rather than having 12 ounces of ground beef, maybe have 8 and add some some extra rice or something like that. And so just getting an idea, like, globally, like how the direction kind of that we need to go. But I do still have people where if they don't have experience tracking, in many cases, you'll have them apply, and a lot of them, might want to lose weight. And it's like, okay, I've been spinning my wheels for years, in a deficit, which the truth is, if they were in a deficit, they wouldn't be spinning their wheels. And so I think that's the first thing. Like, okay, I've been dieting for 3 years. Like the last thing I want to do is diet again. I'm like, well, you haven't been dieting for 3 years. That's the truth. But that's where I think tracking is helpful in just kind of educating them on the, the math behind nutrition, and with like prefacing that, like, this isn't the end all, like, this isn't the end goal. The end goal is to not have you tracking forever. Like, I try to be very upfront with that, but to gain some awareness and make you realize, okay, maybe I was underestimating before or underreporting unintentionally before, and make some refinements. And then once they, we kind of build out, they build out sort of a default menu. And what I like to have people do is like, okay, track your intake. And once you kind of get a good idea of that and learn how to do that, then, have a few options for each meal. Like if they're eating 4 times a day, like have a few breakfast, lunch, and dinner options and a few snack options. And maybe one of those 3 is like a portable option if they need to be, but all of them sort of meet the criteria. That way they can kind of plug and play as they go throughout the day and still be flexible with it, and still, regardless of how they sequence things, still end up in the realm that we want them to be in. But I can't, I mean, I've it's been probably almost 10 years since I've given someone like rigid macros to follow out of the gate. And it's not necessary certainly not necessary for that demographic, but it's even not necessary for most bodybuilders. I think if there's one benefit to it, it would be like later in prep when you're just trying to create a degree of predictability and consistency. So ratios aren't swinging in huge directions day to day. Sodium intake is sort of more or less consistent. But yeah, starting out, it's like seeing where their current knowledge is, getting their level of education up to where it needs to be. And they build that awareness, and then kind of going down the default menu path and getting them comfortable with calling those audibles if they do go out to eat or if they go on vacation, and reminding them along the way, like, okay, like record or, ask yourself after each meal, like, am I still hungry or am I satiated? Because tracking, you almost forget to do that. It's like you hit the number and you just sort of forget about it in many cases. So I think it's useful reminder for people to continue to monitor their hunger and satiety along the way. Yeah, I think it just starts with sort of auditing their knowledge.
How about you, Jeff? What would you do instead of giving them?
I mean, a lot of what
3
he
numbers?
said, but I was also thinking about like what do their routines look like? Like when you get someone new and you start diving into their life context, whether they're educated or not around nutrition, if their routine isn't set up in a way that's going to cater towards good adherence, regardless of the system, like they're not going to go too far. And, I've had my moments where I'm out of routine or habits aren't really all that great. So I think that right there for me is like, let me set something up in a way where they can actually start to eat more regularly. Like if someone might be eating, let's say once or twice a day, it's like, let's work on, let's get 3 or 4 meals in per day instead of 1 or 2. So it's like, if I can get meal timing, where it's set up in a way where it's going to cater towards their life, it's going to be practical. Then from there, okay, we got that established. So let's now focus on your protein intake. Let's make sure you're hitting, roughly X number of grams plus or minus. It might be a 10 gram range, it might be a 30 gram range. It kind of just depends on where this person is. But just establishing that so they have some intention towards that. And then from there, it's like, okay, now let's start thinking about like overall calories. Like, okay, now this is where we start to track a little bit more. Okay, we're tracking protein, now we're tracking calories. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but at least we have some type of ballpark understanding of like where your possible baseline is as far as like where your maintenance is. Are you gaining? Are you losing? And then from there, you could always adjust calories up or down. But to expect someone new to like track perfectly, that's not a realistic expectation. And to me, it's more about setting up a good daily routine and daily habits, something that I know they can follow. And then for there, I'm starting to layer in like how much protein you should be taking. Let's try to spread that across your meals. Okay, now here's calories. Let's see if we can figure out where maintenance is at. Okay, now you're distributing, the rest of your calories based off of where you might need the energy the most, where satiety is needed. Someone, for example, who is, let's say they work from a desk, they're not very active during the day. They may not need as many calories, sitting at a desk, but after work, they're going to the gym. They got kids to take care of, whatever. They need more calories there. So like you're teaching people how to allocate the amount of food based on like what their life is calling for. And to be honest, someone new who kind of like, I don't know where I should be. It's not a bad idea to, take myself back to old Jeff and say, let's put you on a rigid system temporarily. It might be for a week, it might be for a month, or however long it takes you to get accustomed to this rigid baseline we're trying to set up. Because from there, then you can be reactionary. Okay, I've developed consistency with this and I'm executing really well, regardless of what your experience is, good or bad. Like you start to notice, okay, when I'm doing this, at this time, I feel this way, or at this part of the day, I feel this way. So then you start to learn how to adjust calories up and down based on those experiences. Also hunger too, where you're most hungry and things like that. So I think it's just like generally someone new, it needs to be more rigid. And then as you learn, you can start to get a little bit more flexible. And if you take someone like you, Alberto or Eric, I mean, now you're running contest preps without really tracking anything at all. You're kind of just, because a lot of it's just intuition that's been built off of your experience and your knowledge base. But like, even for me, like, I think you have to think about personalities too. Cause, I think at this point for me, like I've been doing this for 40 years, competing for over 30. But to keep my mindset at ease, I still track. I still track my calories. I still track protein, those types of things. But it's not as rigid as it used to be. And I also have the understanding of knowing how to be flexible to work around the life settings, the life situations. So I think it's like you have to get people to evolve over time. And it does come down to like good habits and good education and just understanding like it's going to be a process of learning. And also, to take the people's personalities into account. Like some people I work with, they're experienced too. And they're like, I just feel more comfortable tracking my macros. I feel more comfortable having my fats within a specific range, carbs within a specific range, and protein within. It makes them feel more comfortable and secure. Now, granted, if they've never challenged themselves to go outside of that box, that's my job to say, hey, let's give these other things a try. Let's see if you can become more flexible. Give it an honest go. It's kind of like giving someone more volume or taking away volume. Like you don't know what the result's going to be to actually get them to actually try it. So once someone gives themselves a fair shot of like trying a different setup, if they find success in it and they're comfortable with it, it brings them a lot more peace to the process and they enjoy it. Perfect. But if not, there's nothing wrong with defaulting back to being a little bit more rigid if that person is finding their process to be more enjoyable and it's a lot easier. So I think it's multifaceted in my opinion.
We do get a lot of new folks. I think that's kind of the catch to being I'd say Gucci coach. And by Gucci, I mean like some people wear it and they have no idea why they're wearing it. They just paid all this money to, be in with the crowd. I'll get people sometimes, I'm like, you have no idea why you're here. It's just because, I coach a lot of, I don't know, your girlfriends or something. Right. And so we get some pretty like, I guess some situations that are like very, very, they're new. which is kind of nice, right? Because you get to like raise them from scratch. And so, typically when we start the onboarding process with athletes, I think we all do this. We kind of look at like what is the lowest hanging fruit that they might have missed, right? So if someone is, they're all about training and they have no issue putting on the disturb and, doing widow makers on the hack squat, but I don't know, they're bad about sleep. It's like, I'm not going to give you more widow makers on the hack squat. That's not what's kind of holding you back here. We got to go to that hole in your game, basically. And, sometimes it is nutrition. It's like they do all these other things, right? Like that was my hole for the biggest time. It was just like, I love to train, but the nutritional aspect of things, maybe a little bit too passive. And within that attribute, there's these smaller bars of what add to their total score there, and that's where you start kind of looking for things, right? So, and sometimes it's things like, I don't know, like you said, Jeff, it's like maybe they like their fats to be 45% of their total calories, and it's like, hey, let's try something a little bit more, I guess, anaerobic friendly. Let's maybe like give some make some space for the carbohydrates, things like that. But generally, yes, it's like, where are you starting? Because back in the day with If It Fits Your Macros, people were putting like their mamas on like 3 numbers and proudly talking about like, oh, my mama lost all this weight and she's on macros, right? When in reality, maybe they made it, but a whole lot of mamas would not have made it. And there probably would have been a much more efficient strategy that was a little bit more, dare I say, passive, that you could just kind of built into their day, right? Maybe just have lean protein to start like with all of your meals, right? I wouldn't say stop having, but include some of the things in moderation that you're already eating, and just start there. And that can create a lot of changes without necessarily overwhelming the person. So you have to, look at their current default diet and little by little just kind of remove one thing, add another thing. You want to do more adding, I think, than removing, especially early on, especially if they're not super well trained or have followed any sort of system for a prolonged period of time. But that's actually where you start. And sometimes you can go pretty far without necessarily tracking calories, by simply having them focus on behaviors and how much more quality food is making it in as part of their diet. And yes, having them actually think about their satiety, so they stop doing things like, the old dreaded eating cold fries, even though you're not even hungry anymore and they don't taste good. So that's where we start now. And that makes a whole lot more sense. And obviously, yeah, like you guys said, you scale it up to like where the athlete is at, what their goal is, and what that will require. Like, and yeah, for some athletes, like you guys said, during the last few weeks, maybe you do want to hit something that's, the ranges are much tighter when it comes to the macros that they're hitting, but at the same time, they understand all the safety nets that are there too, and they can kind of audit and kind of like change the play as things are happening in real time. And that's just something that, if it fits your macros, and a lot of systems out there just don't really bring into play. But I guess the issue is that you need to have a coach that is willing to take you on and bring you up to speed when it comes to what you need to know nutritionally right now. And you need to have an athlete that they don't want to be a passive passenger. They want to, be a part of this, and they want to be educated, and they're going to have to be educated so that eventually, and this can't happen, which sounds crazy to people. It's like your bodybuilder diet, when you get to the point where you're not tracking and you just kind of have these patterns built into your day, it's almost as passive as when you were like before your bodybuilding. You're just kind of doing it without necessarily even thinking about it. Like that is the, I think, the ultimate goal for most people, where they can, meet their bodybuilding goals and manipulate their body comp to whatever they want. It's like, hey, I want to lose 10 pounds because vacation's coming up, or hey, I want to gain a clean 15 pounds because, I want to add 70 pounds to my squat or something like that. And you can do those things pretty passively so that you can focus a little bit more on, I think, other things that are best to be measured objectively. I think the first one that comes to mind is going to be your training. And here's the thing. It's like, I think you might have some bodybuilders here listening, serious ones, right? Whether they compete or not, that might be like, but I'm willing to do that little thing that gets me an extra 3% and, track the 3 numbers. And I think my counter to that would be that a lot of these trendy diets that you will see come and go from time to time, the one thing they have in common is they control for calories, like whether it's on purpose or not, right? Whether it's something like the carnivore diet, right? You get rid of a whole third of a category of food. It's gonna, impact how many calories you can eat. Or the South Beach diet, for example, right? It's a point system, something like that. It controls for calories. So that's the big picture thing. That's going to decide whether you gain or lose or maintain weight. And then the other thing is usually these diets prioritize protein. So I think those are the 2 biggest rocks. It's going to be, if you take your caloric needs into consideration and you have those more or less where they need to be for the goal, and your protein is adequate, that takes care of a lot of things all of a sudden. And the thing with macros, kind of going back to actually my first diet where I was having green beans post-training, it's like, if you have someone with just calories and protein, and carbs and fats are a little bit more interchangeable, or even calories, you could say, or even protein in some cases, this allows a athlete that is the serious ones to be a little bit more dynamic with their approach. And sometimes, for some odd reason, bodybuilders don't like that, but for some reason they'll do that in the weight room. So like if they typically bench press, 315, 4 sets of 4 to 6, but today's looking like 295 just to be safe, or 335 because it's a real good day. It's like they'll strike. They'll take what's going on right now into consideration and apply that. And with calories and protein, what this system does is it just allows the athlete and caloric ranges, so not just carbs and fat. They can, again, kind of undulate a little bit, but it lets you do things like, hey, sometimes I get flat in the off season. It's like, what should my next few meals look like? Maybe I should pick up the carbs so that by the time I make it to my next training session.
Flat as in like muscle flat.
Muscular
like
flat.
Glycogen depleted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the end, I think if anything, it pays more respect to these athletes' goals because it gives them more tools, right? It's the old quarterback analogy. If I'm the coach and I'm sending my quarterback out to run this play, but that's not the defense we thought we were going to see, like, please change the play. Like, please, I've taught you how to do this. Like, call the right thing. So for the serious guys, I think that is something that I think we have to say because that is something I've seen my most experienced athletes leverage from just being conscious or having just simply calorie and protein ranges.
But it's not the same for your athletes who are inexperienced. So if they have too much agency, then they might make a bad call.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it could be like, someone who's deep into prep that I love eating my fats, but now all of a sudden their carbs are like uber low, and then they're wondering why they can't train very well because they're glycogen depleted.
Mm-hmm.
So like someone like that, then I'm honing them in. I'm getting probably a little bit more rigid with macro setup. It might be, I'm not going to say, hey, plus or minus 5 grams because I've gone away from that. But it might mean like okay, I don't want your fats to go over X amount. Because I know if I set the fat at a certain level, like they can't go over that amount, chances are carbs are going to come up. But even then, like it has them thinking about food selection too, because like maybe this person likes to, I want to reach in and have a bunch of cheese, for example. But now it's like, okay, I got to think twice about that. Like, okay, my menu needs to be probably a little bit better than that. So I think there's, like, as a coach, I try to like pull levers and use ranges, and those ranges can go up or down depending on where they're an athlete's at. They're beginner, intermediate, advanced. Some of them is more advanced. Yeah, I'm going to give them more agency because chances are they're going to make good decisions anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's crazy for the
the most
newer
part.
ones. It's like you're more restrictive, but at the same time, there's a little bit more freedom there, right? And more, I guess, freedom in that their to-do list sometimes can be a little bit shorter, right? It's like, hey, let's just not skip breakfast. Let's eat enough protein. And after that, the training's going to take care of itself. But it's more restrictive in that sometimes, like, I wouldn't do this with you, Jeff. Like, if I was coaching you, I wouldn't tell you, like, bro, like, add 10 pounds to those dumbbells because you're doing it for a reason. There's a reason why this is the weight you have selected, no matter what I might be seeing through a training video. Whereas with newer athletes, sometimes I will tell them that. It's like, hey, maybe it's time to bring up that weight. I think you've exhausted it. And next check-in, I want to see 5 pounds on those dumbbells or something like that. But in the same light, it can be things like, where's that banana that we'd agreed we're going to have for breakfast because you don't like many fruits and that's the one thing you will eat, right? So with newer athletes, again, they already come with some base knowledge when it comes to making the right moves in real time. But with newer athletes, again, it's both less restrictive, but at the same time, sometimes you do have to be a little bit more explicit with what it is that you want to see from them.
Yeah, I use ranges I find myself using ranges in both situations, but for different reasons. I think a lot of beginners or new people, a big part of it's just getting some sense of success, whether that's results or just executing a process and building, consistency and some momentum. I think momentum is a big thing, especially early on. And so I think ranges can be helpful even early in the sense that you're reducing their likelihood of feeling like they fell short of the objective. If I have too tight parameters early on and they go over that, they feel like they can feel like they failed at times and get discouraged. So there is a fine line there, I think. But the ranges,
It's kind of like it's like an art, right? It's
Yeah.
like an art of kind of knowing like where that range should be.
yeah, and you have
based
to
on
read
that
and a
person.
lot of that's dependent on the person's personality, and getting a read kind of on where, if somebody says like, okay, I really want to lose 20 pounds, I've got a family, weekends, we're notoriously out and about. I'm going to have to eat out here. Like, I'm not going to give them like, okay, here, I want you to hit this narrow range. It's like, if anything, I might on paper give them a more aggressive deficit, knowing that there's a bit of a buffer there. If they do go over, they're still in the right direction. So I think that can be helpful, but the ranges with more advanced athletes, like it is more, for lack of better words, based off their own biofeedback, and like beginners don't have any sense of that in most cases. So like you said, like, okay, I know I have a big leg day tomorrow. It's my higher volume leg day. Let's go on the higher end of the intake today. Like, okay, now today's a rest day. Normally I would scale back a little bit because I'm just, I'm not training and might not be as hungry. But let's say I wake up and I'm ravenously hungry. Like giving them the leeway to push to the high end on those days too if they need to. So letting appetite in their own kind of like it's sort of nutritional periodization that kind of matches up with their training cycle as well. And we've talked about refeeds before and how, sometimes I'll have people, if I'm doing, 2 or 3 consecutive refeeds, I'll usually put like their highest volume day coming off of that, like if they refeed Friday through Sunday and Monday's the muscle group that we want to bring up the most and it's more volume, then they're going to be more or less topped off in terms of glycogen there. So things like that, I think can be helpful. Giving them some agency in how they manage it, knowing that at the end of the day, regardless of where you fall in this range, we're still taking a step in the direction we want to go. And we have a long enough and healthy enough timeline that we can afford to be able to do that and still reach the end goal in the time we have available.
And my this was kind of my epiphany at a certain point with like if it fits your macros and how it didn't do the things that we wanted it to do was, I think it was just Facebook at the time, but athletes that I had in like the late 2000s, like they'd pop up in my feed and I'm like, man, you're clearly not taking care of yourself anymore. This is like quite sad. And it's because that's all they kind of knew, right? Is like, I'm either hitting macros or I'm not. And the way I see this bodybuilding thing for a lot of people is, even if you're competitive, it's like this might be a short window in your health and fitness journey. It reminds me of that book, right? Like the guy with the super tight shirt, Body for Life, right? Like that's what we're trying to do here. It's almost like
Bill Phillips.
I don't know, athletes that go, yeah. They go to school for, they got a scholarship for a sport, and it's like, kid, you're not even going to class. Like there's going to be life after sports. Like I suggest you go to class and get yourself that degree. And the same thing when it comes to this, it's like you want to, as you're doing this bodybuilding thing, is like eating away and pick up a whole host of skills that are going to make it so that once this is over, it's like you can still, keep yourself healthy and fit in a way that is pretty passive. And again, that's the issue with not just if it fits your macros, but a lot of systems beyond that is that they kind of expire at us after a certain point. And that's why sometimes maybe what we're trying to discuss here is a bit complicated, because I think generally speaking, a lot of our audience knows how things work, but what they don't understand is like the context, like when to roll it out. So for example, like I know how to lose weight, I know how to get shredded, but I've mentioned this at next contest prep. I think I want to have Jeff in my corner from beginning to end so that he can tell me, yo, strike, yo, back off, yo, what's going on here? Let's adjust that when it matters, and given the specific context of that week in that situation. And at the end, that is basically what we're trying to do with people these days. It's like, yeah, your immediate goals, they matter to us a whole lot, but there's also, and this might be too far ahead for some people, but there's life after bodybuilding. And I want you to be that like jacked, lean, 60-year-old man that doesn't even have to diet for vacation because he has all his stuff, all his things in order. Like that's kind of the ultimate goal here. It's like the way you described finances, right? It's like at some point, like you hear of the phrase, what is it? Financial freedom. Like there should also be like a fitness freedom, where it's like just something you kind of do, but you're not tracking your macros poolside. Like you have a whole set of habits that are passive that you don't even realize you're doing them, and you're just going about your day and focusing on, I guess, the real important things in life.
Why did I think you were trying to talk about me there? But I'm not 60 yet. I'm getting 5 years away
yet.
from that.
Not yet. It's coming.
You could go to the beach now though, Jeff. No problem. Your habits.
That good. Yeah. What's interesting is like when I'm not trying to get ready for shows, like it's fairly easy at this point now where I'm probably closer to Eric and Berto, like not tracking a whole lot. but because of my habits are so ingrained and my daily routine looks very similar day to day, like it's like Alberto was saying, it's like passive. It's kind of easy. It's like low stress. But in order to get to that point, I had to have gone through everything that I've gone through to get to that point in time where like I have a high degree of skill.
Okay, I guess this is how we close this. I think we end it with a fun segment. I want each of us to give our 3 top IIFYM foods.
No, man, I'm not going to do that. I do not like these types of things. If I say the 3 foods, there's going to be like 1 or 2 people that are listening to this and are like, I'm going to go eat that because Jeff eats it.
I thought you were going to say they're going to say that's
I know
too
it,
because people always do that. They're like, oh, that's
You
the
just
worst
explained
protein.
dipping Olestra chips in whey.
Yeah.
So yeah,
okay, so that's one. We got one already. You
could
already
be-
gave yourself. Yeah, that's weird, bro.
They're off the market though. You can't get them. You can't get them.
I'd say mine probably tortilla chips.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
a sucker for tortilla chips.
La Favorita.
There's a local company here. Yeah, La Favorita. They've got inaccurate nutrition info, so they're enticing to the macro crowd. But if you just double all the values on there, it's probably pretty much in line, which is what I did last prep when I would use them occasionally. This one, like it's not bad. Popcorn. I really like low fat popcorn.
Yeah.
I think when you're dieting and you're hungry, like it's a good bit of volume. And then I remember, strawberries are probably like my favorite fruit when I'm dieting. Just because you can eat a lot of them. Like I remember eating like 60 grams of carbs from strawberries, and and feel like your stomach's gonna explode because it's a lot. But yeah, nothing too crazy. I never really got into the Pop-Tart thing. Like I never went too far down the processed route of things, I wouldn't say. Homemade pizzas make occasionally. I forget the name of I think it was Icon Meals, I think is the company. I could be
the popcorn,
wrong, but they had the protein popcorn. I used that quite a bit last prep too. But I also think those macros, they changed mysteriously like a year later. And so which like the lesson there is like my maintenance intake is probably even higher than I thought it was, because I was eating them like every refeed day, like have a bag of those. But yeah, nothing too crazy.
You know what it did for me was it broadened my palate, because I was eating only like bodybuilder foods. And I remember one day in between, it was a lunch break. I go to Trader Joe's. It was right across the street from the place I worked at. And I'm like, I need something that hits these numbers. And I remember getting these 2 items in particular. One was people are going to give me crap for this one, but I get it. It was canned sardines in water, this one specifically. And that was like extra savory, extra salty, all the things that taste a little different when you're dieting. Because I remember grabbing those. And then the other thing that I grabbed, this was in 2008, was my intro to Greek yogurt. I'm like, what is this? It was the little like Faya cups, the tiny ones. I'm like, I don't know what you are, but the numbers are some sort of dairy product, but the numbers are banging. So I remember I took just one along with my sardines. And I remember having those on my lunch break. And I remember coming back, and because the Greek yogurt, I had never had it before. This is 2008, was not, now it looks like our cereal aisle in this country. I remember just getting my little basket and I'm taking everything with me. Because it was just different. It was like, it was airy. It tasted like it had some fat when you haven't been having a whole lot of dietary fat, which at that point in the prep, I wasn't. But it was, so that was in hindsight a positive thing, is it just broadened up, made me less of a picky eater. Not that I was too much of that. But I think all around it made my diet better, because now it's constantly rotated with foods that they're not just tasty, but they're good for you. And then, the last thing is just those Pringles. If you're listening, you have a whole large demographic, especially as popular as lifting is, that are willing to shart in their leggings for Pringles like that.
Hard to feel sexy when you're shitting your pants, though. That's
All of a sudden, leggings just get a shade darker. Sprinkles. That's part of the influencer review, and they're shard safe. All right, I will cut it there. But yeah, that was pleasant. That was it was good to reminisce on those dark but much needed times.
What's going on, everybody? Eric Helms here, Chief Science Officer of 3DMJ. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and let me just take 1 second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I do with Lauren Colenso-Semple, Eric Trexler, as well as Mike Zerdos. These are experts in their field, and we cover all the information relevant to you as an athlete or coach if you're working with strength or physique athletes, or if you're a recreational or competitive athlete yourself. We cover nutrition, training, sports psychology, and health. And we do this in written format, as well as, since you like the podcast, audio summaries, as well as video concept reviews. If you're a trainer, we also have continuing education credits for ACSM, NSCA, NASM, and ACE. So head over to 3dmusclejourney.com, click on the products tab, and you can find us there. I look forward to seeing you, and enjoy the podcast.